Good morning everyone. Welcome to the YouTube channel of Little Flower School Rapti Nagar. I am Amit Kumar, your computer science teacher, and this is your 21st video lecture for class 12th A and 12th B. As you can see, today is our revision of Java programming, and we are going to deal many of the terms and aspects related to objects and classes. Though you have studied all of them, but there are few pitfalls where you generally commit mistakes. So today we are going to discuss about those pitfalls as well. So without wasting any time further, let's proceed with today's lecture. So the first topic that we are going to start up and we are going to discuss today is class and objects. Now, what is a class and what is an object? So any real life entity surrounding us actually represents an object. So a table, a fan, a copy, a pen, a book, a student, a teacher, each and everything surrounding us is actually an object. So each and every object that is surrounding us having few things, like they are having few characteristics with them, they are having few behaviors with them. For example, if I talk about a football, imagine a football. Definitely a football is nothing but an object. There are few things that a football has. It has a volume, right? It has a volume, and that volume decides how much air it can hold, how much pressure it can hold. It has a size. Okay, maybe you can give a characteristics like it has a color, or the company which is actually making it. Okay, there can be different characteristics like that. So these are the things which is representing characteristics of football. We also say these characteristics as attributes of football. Okay, similarly it has some certain behaviors, like whenever we kick, it actually moves, or it actually transfers from one place to another. It bounces back. Whenever it strikes some surface, it bounces back. And there are some other behaviors like that. So football is an object having some attributes and having some behaviors, right? So like this, each and everything that is surrounding us is having some characteristics and behaviors, are nothing but an object. There are few more things related to an object, like we have discussed about its characteristics and behavior, but we haven't discussed about its state, we haven't discussed about its identity. For example, the volume, there is a specific volume of a football, right? And it's not necessary that every time you will enter that much amount of air into it. Maybe the amount of air inside the football is very less than the maximum volume of it. So normally a football can hold some cubic centimeter of air into it. For example, let's suppose a football can hold 100 centimeter cube of air, but we are entering only 30 centimeter cube, right? So the specific value of an attribute, right, is actually the state of an object. And what about we have discussed about characteristics, behavior and state. Now what about the identity? Now there can be different footballs from the same company, right, which may have the same amount of volume or the size or the color. So there should be something that is unique to that specific object. Now that unique attribute, that unique characteristic of an object is nothing but its identity. So here we can mention the barcode or the serial number, the batch number in which this football is manufactured, that can represent a certain identity. So we have discussed that objects are all real life entities which have some characteristics, some behavior, some state, and of course some identity to uniquely identify it. There can be different examples of objects like that, but there must be some place, there must be somewhere or someone who have defined the characteristics of the football, who have defined that it should be in a spherical shape, it should contain air into it, it should have a certain color or something like that. So all the definition of a football, all the characteristics of the football, all the templates of the football, when that is saved at a certain place in form of a template, when the definition of an object, listen to this carefully, when the definition of the object is kept at a place in form of a template, then that template, that blueprint is nothing but a class. So class is what? Class is actually the definition of an object. So all the common characteristics, all the common behaviors, they are kept at one single place, they are wrapped up at one single place, and that single place is nothing but a class. Similarly, so when we talk about class and object, football can be a class, football can be an object. Now if we are talking about the definition, then we are talking about the class, but if we are talking about the physical existence of it, then we are talking about the object. Okay, for example, if we talk about human, okay, so human is a class. When we are talking about its definition, having characteristics like eyes, ears, nose, can walk, talk, move, eat, sleep. So there can be a place where this definition is given. So the place where this definition is given is nothing but the class. But when any human is actually taking birth, okay, when any human is actually taking birth according to the definition, then this physical existence of this class is nothing but an object. So when we are just defining the thing, we are creating a class, and when we are creating an instance of the definition, we are creating an object. So class is just a definition of the object, object is instance of a class. So class and objects are related to each other. In Java, they have provided us a very big library, more than 8,000 classes are available there. So we can create object of any of these classes, and we can perform that function defined in the class itself. For example, we know there is a scanner class, there is a buffered reader class, there is an input stream reader class, there is a file reader, file writer class, and we have dealt with these classes in these video lectures itself, and we perform a certain task when we use a certain class, right? So to use them, definitely we create an object of it, and a specific behavior is called, or a specific method is called. Now the next thing that we are going to see is what are attributes and behaviors. So though we have seen example of attributes and behaviors, but how do we define attributes and behaviors? So to define attributes and behaviors in a class, we define data members and member methods respectively. See, all the data members are actually attributes of the object, and all the member methods are actually behaviors of the object. So if we talk about attributes of an object, what we are actually talking about is what are the various characteristics that object has, like the example of football we have seen. Similarly, if we take an example of a car, so there can be characteristics like number of seats, color, number of gears, and all that. So we will define these things as data members of a class, and data members of class are nothing but variables declared inside the class. So data members of a class are variables or objects declared in class scope. So if we are declaring anything inside the class, that is nothing but the data member, and we have defined plenty of data members in our class. What are member methods? So member methods are actually methods which are part of the class. So methods which are part of the class. So with the help of methods we define behaviors, with the help of variables or objects we define characteristics. So I hope you understood what are attributes, which is also known as characteristics, and behavior of an object. So the next topic, so we have seen what is class, what is an object, what are attributes and behaviors of an object, and how do we define that inside a class. The next topic to discuss is characteristics of object-oriented programming. So we know there are different methodologies through which we create programs in different languages, and many languages are there which are very helpful for us to create programs, but all the languages follows different methodology. So a programming methodology in which we create classes, objects, are actually object-oriented programming. And in object-oriented programming, there are few facilities, there are few features or characteristics that we get. Let's talk about these characteristics. As we have said, objects are real-life entities. So all the characteristics that we get in object-oriented programming belongs to real-life characteristics only. Now before we move on to that, let's see what is an object-oriented programming approach. An object-oriented programming approach is a programming methodology in which our main focus is related to the objective of the program. So what sort of the thing our program is going to do, okay, is actually the objective of the program. We decide first what the program is going to do or what we are going to achieve through the program. Once the objective of the program is decided, then we decide about the various objects which we will use to attain the objective. And once we decide different objects, we decide the common characteristics and behaviors of the object, and hence we define the class for it. After creating classes, we create object of that, and hence we call certain behaviors to execute our program. So this is how object-oriented programming approach works. And as I told you, object-oriented programming gives us many features. Now the two and the most important facility or feature that we get with object-oriented programming are abstraction and encapsulation. So let's talk about abstraction and encapsulation. Let's talk about encapsulation first. Have you seen a capsule, a medicine which you take? Okay, I hope most of you have taken a capsule as a medicine in your life. So the actual medicine is hidden inside that plastic jacket of the capsule. So what they do, especially with the medicines which are very bitter in taste, so they keep that medicine inside a plastic jacket, and that plastic jacket is nothing but the capsule. So everything is hidden inside, the taste is hidden inside, the actual medicine is hidden inside. We take in the capsule, we never get we never realize about the taste of the medicine, and once that medicine get inside us, it digested, and then it digests the plastic jacket, and then the medicine come out, and then the whole process works. So actually the main medicine, the taste of the medicine is hidden inside a jacket. Similarly, in programming, when we hide, when we encapsulate, or when we wrap up the data and method in one single place, and that is nothing but a class. So when we wrap up data and method at one single place known as class, we are actually doing encapsulation. So encapsulation is wrapping up things inside a single unit, and it helps us to hide many things from the user or from the person to whom we don't want to show it. Similarly, we all are able to work on computer, but you see most of the functionalities, most of the hardware device of the computer is encapsulated inside a single system unit, like CPU, RAM, motherboard, DVD driver or DVD writer or anything like that. Even all the chips and all the chipsets, all the ICs, they are all encapsulated inside one single unit. That one single system unit is known as cabinet, right? So here also encapsulation is done. If we talk about a normal fan working at your home, most of the machinery of the fan is encapsulated inside. If you talk about an automobile, most of the machinery and important parts are encapsulated inside. So encapsulation is a thing which we do normally in our real life. But why we do encapsulation? Actually, we perform encapsulation so that we can attain abstraction. Now, what is an abstraction? Abstraction is actually knowing about the essential details of anything without considering its background details. So if you know only the essential thing about anything, and with the help of those essential things you know how to work on it, then you are having an abstract view about it. For example, we all know, or some of us know, how to drive without knowing the actual working of the machinery when we drive the automobile. Most of us know how to work on computer without actually knowing what happens inside the machinery when we perform a certain task on the computer. That means we all have an abstract view. We all know the essential things and we work on that specific thing without considering the background details, and which actually stops us, because we all are very curious. Humans are very curious. So which is stopping us to know the background details? The encapsulation. So rest of the thing which is encapsulated inside actually helps us to focus only on the essential things and not considering the background details. So encapsulation is a thing through which we can attain abstraction. So encapsulation and abstraction are two different things, but they go parallelly together as two tracks of railway lines. So one is incomplete without other. The next topic or the next feature that Java provides us is polymorphism. Now what is polymorphism? One thing available in many forms. When a certain thing is available in many forms, that is polymorphism. Now we all are polymorphic. In our real life, we all are polymorphic. Like I am a teacher right now, and once this class is over, I will become a father of a son, a husband of a wife, a son of a father, and sometimes I also become student when I go to my teachers. So I am one single person, but behaving differently at different situations. Similarly, in our programming, we can create methods which behaves differently at different times. And if we are able to do that, what we are going to achieve? We are going to achieve polymorphism. So we can make one thing and we can execute it in many forms. Because of this, because of polymorphism, Java is also known as dynamic. So we will talk about that later on. The next feature that is given to us is known as inheritance. It's also a biological term. When a child attains properties from the parents, okay? So when a child attains property of its parents, then that is known as inheritance. Here also in programming, we create class. And sometimes we create class which attains property of another class. So if we are doing that, the thing that we are attaining now, the thing that we are achieving now is inheritance. Now let's talk about programmatically how we attain them. For example, how do we attain encapsulation? So I told you we create class and we create, there can be any name of it, we put data members and member methods inside the class. Right, we keep these things inside the class. So by keeping these things, by wrapping up these things inside a class, what we are actually attaining? We are actually attaining encapsulation. But even after that, even we encapsulated each and everything inside the class, few things are available for the class user, for the object creator of the class. The object creator knows the class name and they also know the method names. Even they know the parameters that they need to pass in the methods. So these are the things that is abstracted to them. Let's take an example. Like we all know how to use scanner class. So few things that is abstracted to us, that is available to us, that is known to us is the name of the class, the name of different methods that we are using in the class. Like scanner object we can create with the name of the class, and with the name of the method we can call them and we can perform different tasks of scanner. So these things are abstracted to us. Now what are the things which is encapsulated from us or which is hidden from us? So the coding of the method, like we know whenever we will call next int, it's going to take a number from the user, it's going to accept something on the console screen and convert it into integer and return it back. We know that, but we don't know how it does it. What are the various codes written inside the next int method? So all that things are hidden from us, but few things are abstracted to us. So class name, method names are the thing which is abstracted to us. Now let's talk about how we attain polymorphism, some example of that. You all have called println method, do you remember? Now what are the various data members you can pass in it? What are the valid data members you can pass into the println method? So if you remember, you can pass integer, double, float, char, string, boolean or any other data type. You can pass them into println and println will work. That means println method can print anything on the screen, any type of the data on the screen. Now how is it possible? It is possible because of polymorphism. Okay, if you remember when we were doing file handling, I called a file writer object. Do you remember that? And I called the constructor of the file writer. I called two different constructors of the file writer. In the first constructor, I only passed the file name, and in the second constructor, I passed the file name along with a boolean value. So there are two different constructors which can be called for file writer. Do you remember that? Now how is it possible? Again, example of polymorphism. So polymorphism is performed in programming. Now let's see one more example, one example of inheritance. Now do you remember when I performed exception handling? That time there was a class, I told you exception class, and I told you this class can handle all the types of exception, and I have given you a reason for that. The reason was exception class is super class of all the exceptions. That means the rest of the exception is inherited from this. So there must be some certain characteristics, some certain behaviors of this class which are common to all the exceptions. And why it is common to all the exception class? Because rest of the exception class has inherited this from this exception class. So we have discussed till now what are the various features provided by object-oriented programming and how Java achieves these features. We have seen an example of it as well. Now two more topics that we are going to discuss is data hiding. Now how data hiding is possible, how we can hide data. Now Java provides us access specifier, and the next topic is access specifier. We are going to talk about it. But with the help of access specifiers, you can hide any data inside a class, and anything that is hidden inside a class cannot be seen by anyone who is outside the class, who have not created the class itself, or who don't have the source code of the class. So things can be hidden inside a class with the help of access specifiers. And the last topic to discuss is dynamic binding. I talked about polymorphism, right? One thing available in many forms, like I have given you example of println, and we can call println method with different types of data, right? Now the binding that is done over there, or the polymorphism that is done over there, is static polymorphism. Java supports dynamic polymorphism also. Now what is dynamic polymorphism? In dynamic polymorphism, the thing the program is going to do, or the task that the program is going to execute, is decided while the program is actually running, not at the time of coding. Like println is already defined with all the data types. So that is static polymorphism because it is already defined, it's already declared, all the code is already written. But there is a polymorphism, there is a kind of polymorphism supported in Java where the different forms are not decided at the time of coding. In fact, it is decided later on, maybe at the time when the program is running. So that's why I am telling you Java supports dynamic binding as well. So we have seen what are objects and classes, we have discussed about attributes and behaviors, then we have seen different characteristics or features provided by object-oriented programming. Now let's talk about access specifiers. Now what are access specifiers? Access specifiers are the keywords provided by the Java which actually specifies the scope of access of any member. Like there are different members, I told you data members can be there as part of a class, member methods can be there as part of a class, but when you are specifying with help of keyword, like up to which place you are going to use it or up to which place it is accessible, then whenever you are specifying that with help of a keyword, then that keyword is nothing but an access specifier. Java provides 4 access specifiers with help of 3 keywords. So there are 3 keywords: public, private and protected. So with help of three keywords, definitely three access specifiers are there. One is public access specifier, one is private access specifier, and one is protected access specifier. If we don't specify any of them, that means no keyword. When we don't specify any keyword, then this is also a kind of scope or kind of access specifier. So let's talk about the differences between them. Okay, so let's talk about public. Public is freely accessible. Freely accessible. Freely accessible means anything which is declared as public can be accessed anywhere inside our program, outside the class. Inside our program means inside the class. So we can use a public member anywhere inside the class. We can create object of the class, and with the help of object we can access public members. So we can access public members outside the class, and even we can access a public member outside the scope of a package. Okay, so actually the things that we are discussing today, it's theoretical aspect of programming, and I am also telling you some examples of it, like where we have achieved that in Java. But in the next video lecture, I am going to tell these things practically. I am going to show you programs where I am going to use different access specifiers, and I will show you like which access specifiers can be used up to which level. But if we talk about public, it can be accessed inside the class, outside the class, as well as outside the package. That means it can be accessible anywhere. But if we talk about private, so all the private members can be accessed inside the class itself. So there is only one place where a private member can be accessed, that is inside the class. What about protected? Protected are like private, they can be accessed inside the class, but there is a special feature which is actually differentiating between private and protected, and that feature is protected members can be inherited. So that means the first place where it can be used is inside the class, and the second place where it can be used is inside the subclass. So a protected member can be inherited as well. So if you are performing inheritance, if you are taking characteristics of a class inside another class, then all the protected members will also be part of the new class, but private members cannot be inherited. If we talk about default, now sometimes students get confused between public and default, and they say that both are having same access, but actually it's not true. Then why we think that they are having same access? So let's see that. Let's see what's the difference between public and a default, and let's also discuss why we feel like they are having same access. So all the public access specifiers are available everywhere, all the members which are public, but all the members which are default are available inside the class and inside the package. You cannot access it outside the package. Similarly, inheriting it is not possible. So default members and public members, there is a difference between them. It is accessible inside the package, it is accessible outside the package as well. And this is the point because of which we feel like they both are same. We never, all the programs that we have created up to now, we never created packages for our programs. And that's why the things that we keep default are accessible. But we will feel the difference if we will create programs in different packages. So there, these default members cannot be accessed outside the package. So if we want to create anything that is accessible everywhere, we better keep it public. If we want to create anything which should not be accessed outside and which should not be inherited as well, we should keep it private. If we want to keep something which should not be accessed outside but can be inherited, we should keep them protected. But if we want to keep things accessible inside the package only, we should keep them default. So there are three keywords with the help of which we access, or we have 4 access specifiers in Java, and we use them accordingly. The next topic that we are going to discuss today is about memory allocation. Now what is memory allocation? Memory allocation is occupying space in memory, taking some space in memory, allocating some space in memory. And whenever we talk about memory, we are actually talking about RAM. So if we are able, or if we are allocating any space in memory, if we are taking any space in memory, the thing that we are doing is memory allocation. And there are two types of memory allocation in Java. There are two types of, or there are two ways through which we can occupy space in memory. The first is known as static memory allocation. The second one is known as dynamic memory allocation. When we say static memory allocation, we want to say that we are already knowing about how much space we want to take, and we are taking that space by writing or by declaring that thing. For example, all the primitive data types, all the variables that are created of primitive data types perform static memory allocation, because whenever that certain statement is executed, memory space is taken. Whenever that certain statement is executed, the declaration statement, for example, if you have written int a, only this much will take 4 bytes of space in memory, and it is also fixed, 4 bytes. Integer will take 4 bytes, byte will take 1 byte, short will take, and like that. All the primitive data types have fixed spaces with them. Now, according to the data type that we are using, the amount of space is taken in the memory. So when the amount of space to be taken in the memory is already fixed, right, then that is nothing but static memory allocation. And in static memory allocation, memory space is taken as soon as the declaration statement is executed. But if we talk about dynamic memory allocation, all the reference data types take dynamic memory allocation. Let's talk about integer array. If we have written like int arr and the array symbol with it, is this going to take any space in memory? No. Is this going to tell how much space we want to take? No. This much will only declare in our program that there is an array known as arr which I am going to use, and it is of integer type. But it's not declaring how much space it should take in memory, and even it's not taking any space. So for all the non-primitive data type or reference data type, the memory allocation that we do is dynamic memory allocation. And to perform dynamic memory allocation, we use a keyword known as new. So a new keyword is used to take space in memory. We have to tell to this new keyword how much space we want to take. And if you remember the array declaration statement, there we specify after the new the data type and of course the size of the array. So dynamic memory allocation is allocating space in memory while using the new keyword, and with the help of new keyword you will also specify the amount of space that you want to take. So it's also not fixed. Now the next topic that we are going to discuss is about static keyword. This is going to be okay, let's see if time is left, we will discuss one more topic, otherwise it's going to be our last topic. Static keyword. So what is static keyword? First of all, now static keyword is a keyword which actually enhances our members or the functionalities of the members. Like, what are the members? We know members are data members or member methods. So we can make a data member as static or non-static. If we don't use static keyword, it's by default non-static. Similarly, we can make a member method as static or non-static. If we use static keyword, it is static, otherwise it's non-static. But what is the difference between a static data member and a non-static data member? And of course, what is the difference between a static method and a non-static method? So let's see. A static data member is a member which actually shares its copy with all the objects. So whenever a class is having a data member, for example, a class ABC is there, okay, and this class is having 3 data members, and similarly it is having 1 or 2 methods as well, accept and display. Okay, so suppose I create 2 or 3 objects of this class. So what will happen? Now all the objects will have their own copy of ABC. So if I create 3 objects like O1, O2 and O3, so O1 will have its own ABC, O2 will have its own ABC, and O3 will have its own ABC. That means all the objects will have their own copy of the data members, especially when the data members are non-static. So we should say all the objects of a class have their individual copy of non-static data members. But in case if I declare this data member as static, what will be the difference? The difference will be the objects will not have their own copy. In fact, these objects will share the copy. Like O2 will also have the same reference which O1 and O3 is having. So all O1, O2 and O3 will refer to the same A, B and C when the data members are static. So static data members share their copy with all the objects. Now the next thing is static member methods. So what are static member methods? Static member methods are all those members which can be accessed without creating any class of the object. Now do you remember, like we are using math class methods like sqrt, cbrt, pow, random, round, ceil, floor. We have used plenty of math functions with the help of math class, right? And to call any of these methods, we have never created object of math class. Why? Because all these methods are static. So if you are having a static method, you need not to create any object of the class to call that method. So static methods are actually available or can be directly accessed with the name of the class. That's the actual difference between non-static and a static method. But if we talk about static method, one point of caution is also there. If you are having a static method, you cannot use any non-static member inside it, of course, which are declared outside. So do you remember, whenever you were creating the main method inside a class, to access the methods of the class, you have to create an object of the class itself, because non-static methods cannot be called inside a static method body. In fact, non-static data members cannot be accessed inside static method body. So this is the point of caution. If you want to use any non-static member inside a static method, you have to declare that non-static member inside the static method and then you can use it. Okay, so this was about static keyword and what are static data members and static methods and the difference between static and non-static. The next and the final topic of today's lecture is about method overloading. Now method overloading is a technique of static polymorphism. You have seen method overloading first time in class 10th, then again you have seen it in class 11th, and now we are going to use it in class 12th. So what are method overloading? Method overloading means there are more than one methods inside the class with same name. So there can be more than one methods with same name inside the class. Yes, it is possible. But there should be some differences between them. Like if there are twins existing in a family, still there is a difference between them, their names, their DNA. There should be something which is different, right? Here also, if we are having two different methods with same name, one thing should be different, and that thing is signature of the method. Now the question is, what do you mean by signature of a method? Now signature of a method is actually the parameters of the method. And when we say signature, we never actually talking about the return type. So return type is not part of the method signature, only the parameters. And there can be three ways we can distinguish the methods with each other or the signature of the methods with each other. Now what are the three ways of changing the signature? They are changing the number of parameters, changing the type of parameters, and changing the order of parameters. So I am just showing you an example over here, and we will discuss these things as practicals in the next video lecture. Okay, so let's see method signature we are talking about. Suppose we are declaring a show method, return type is void, okay, and I'm not passing any parameter to it. So I can create one more show method inside the class, okay, with one integer parameter. So you can see these two methods are different, their signatures are different because number of parameters are different. I can create one more show method inside this class with double parameter, So you can see these three methods are different. They are different because of number of parameters. If we talk about the second and the third method, their number of parameters are same, but their type of parameters are different. So the first way to change the signature is number of parameter. The second way to change the signature is type of parameter. But in case if number of parameter and type of parameter are same, for example, if we want to make two show methods and both the show methods should have one integer and one double. So what we can do? We can change their order. For example, in the first one we are passing an integer and a double. So in the second one we can pass a double and the integer. I change the order. Okay, so the third way through which we can change the signature of a method is changing the order of the parameter. So if we change the number of the parameter, signature changes. If we change the type of the parameter, signature changes. And if we change the order of the parameter, signature changes. So by doing any of these things, you can actually make more than one methods with same name inside a class, and you can perform method overloading. So that was the last topic of today's video lecture. In today's video lecture, we discussed about objects and classes. We discussed about attributes and behaviors. We discussed about object-oriented programming. We discussed about features of object-oriented programming like abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, dynamic binding, and we also discussed about access specifiers, memory allocation, static memory allocation, dynamic memory allocation, use of static keyword, and finally how we do method overloading. So in the next video lecture, that is your 22nd video lecture, we are actually going to see these things practically. Till then, have a nice day and hope to meet you in the next video lecture. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.